Hello, my name is John Threadgard, and I'm a focusing and experiential psychotherapist, and this is part of the dialogue with Dr. Pucci, and particularly concerning the ABC theory. Now, I'm very going to quickly describe, for those who haven't seen his video, what the ABC theory is, and then then say why it is that many counsellors and psychotherapists simply don't agree with the theory. Now, the ABC theory can be summarised as follows: that the way that we think about an activating event, A is the awareness and activating event, and B is the way that we think about it, actually determines how we feel. And therefore, if we're suffering emotional or psychological disturbance, we actually need to change the way we think in order to change the way we feel. Now, quite clearly, there are lots of other counselling models apart from CBT that don't accept this theory, and there are lots of psychotherapists and counsellors who wouldn't accept it, regardless of the model, unless, of course, perhaps they are CBT therapists. So I'm going to be looking at some of the objections to the ABC theory, and as I'm looking at those objections, I'm also going to be exploring the alternatives. Now, logically, I'm a great fan of logic. The ABC theory is either the sole cause of psychological disturbance, or the theory is correct, and thinking is the sole determinant, or it's simply one determinant amongst many, in which case you need to work out what is causing the psychological disturbance, and not simply rely on the ABC theory. Or in fact, the ABC theory is completely wrong. I'm not going to say which of those three I think. I think it's fairly obvious that I'm doing the video that I don't believe that it's the sole explanation to psychological disturbance. So why is it that many counsellors and psychotherapists don't accept the ABC theory? Well, one reason is that the ABC theory doesn't accord with what we know about child development. So the first thing, therefore, I want to say is that, take an example of a pregnant mother. Pregnant mother gets attacked, has a traumatic reaction. The baby, even though the baby hasn't been born yet, can actually be traumatised while in the womb. Now, the baby doesn't have the ability to think. Now, if the ABC theory were the sole explanation to emotional and psychological disturbance, then the baby who's been traumatised in the womb shouldn't, in fact, be traumatised because he or she can't think. And I don't think, Dr. Pucci, you're going to dispute the idea that babies can be traumatised. So the theory isn't a sole explanation for emotional and psychological disturbance. Now, if we go on further in terms of child development, there is another theory, in fact, that to me actually makes much more better sense, and that is that emotions are intricately linked not only to the body, to what happens to the body, but also to felt needs. Now, felt needs are something that human beings share with the animal kingdom. So let me give you an example. Animals and babies alike have the felt need for food. They get hungry. Now, when that felt need is not being fulfilled, the animal, and indeed the baby, will get emotionally distressed. Let's say that the felt need is hunger. Now, if the mother cuddles the baby, and that's another thing that's really important, physical touch, the baby will still continue to cry if its felt need is not for touch, but for food. When mother offers bottle or breast, the baby will then begin to have the feeling of hunger will begin to dissipate. The distress at the felt need not being fulfilled will also begin to dissipate, or will begin to go away, And if there are no other causes of disturbance, the child will then begin to feel content and maybe even feel happy. So what you can see here is that felt needs give the failure to fulfill felt needs give rise to distress. The fulfillment of those needs, of felt needs, actually leads to happiness. Something very simple, but emotions are linked to the body, emotions are linked to felt needs. There's another wonderful example of the baby's need for touch if they're to be emotionally and psychologically well. And Dr. Eugene Gendelman gives the example in Mexico of a pristine hospital, for example, where the babies weren't thriving at all and were getting very distressed, and a prison which was fairly grotty conditions, but where the babies who were with their mothers were thriving. And in this example, they find, why is it the case? Well, the babies had their felt need for touch being fulfilled in the prison, that they weren't being fulfilled in the hospital. So that again demonstrates the importance of the body. Now let me give you another example, which is not to do with felt needs as such, but to do with how emotions are intricately linked with the body. Now there's SAD, seasonally acquired or seasonally affected disorder. What they've discovered is that people who experience SAD can get considerable relief through vitamin D supplements or indeed a sunshine lamp. The less sunshine there is, the less our bodies produce vitamin D. When that vitamin D is restored to the body, people then, like moods, lighten. Now this again demonstrates very clearly that ABC is not a sole determinant of psychological emotional disturbance. I've only got about 3 minutes left. I'm going to briefly talk about fight, flight and freeze. This is again something we share with the animals. Now an animal, as well as a human being, when animals sense danger, there are automatic responses, bodily physiological responses that happen. The body, the heart bumps faster, there is energy produced in the body, and that's for two things, either to flee or to fight. And interestingly, for example, animals that do successfully flee then shake and discharge the air surplus energy. One of the things, one of the features of people who are traumatized is the fact that they often have shaking symptoms. Now, the other mechanism is the freeze. If it cannot fight or flight, then it freezes. It goes like from 70 miles an hour to stop. A number of reasons for the freeze mechanism. It can stop the amount of pain if the animal is actually killed, and it can also, if the predator gets distracted, the animal can come out of the freeze and flee. What happens with human beings, partly this is where cognitions do come in fact, is that we fail to actually go through the process. That there is trapped energy in the body, that trapped energy is actually the root cause of emotional psychological disturbance, not the way that we think about it. So the therapy has to discharge the trapped energy, and simply changing the way you think is unlikely to achieve that. Now I really am coming up, I think, to the end of my 10 minutes, so this is part of a dialogue. If you want to respond, Dr. Pucci or anyone else, please do so, and I welcome your comments. Thanks for listening.